To create Active Directory objects in bulk with a CSV, the first thing we need to do is have an actual CSV file containing all of the information that we want to sync. So I have a employee CSV file here, and you can see that it has a few different employees. Looks like it has, 3 different employees on here. And each employee has first name, last name, the department they're in, the employee ID, which is a unique identifier that's going to be important, location, phone number, and then the computer name that the employee is supposed to be assigned. All right, so now that we have the CSV file, we then need to kind of do some planning. We need to figure out how we're going to make this sync script work. So I want to create these users that are in this CSV file. To accurately do that, I need to map the CSV field with an Active Directory attribute. So you can see here on line 27 through 31, that's where I'm doing it. Right now, these are just comments. I'm just planning this out. So first off, I need to know what the employee ID is. We're going to need that to do a one-to-one match between each of those. And then notice that the first name is actually called first space name in the CSV file, and then the first name is represented by the given name with no space in the Active Directory attribute, and on it goes. And the same thing with computers, because I know that I want to be able to create computer accounts with this as well. I have to match up that one-to-one. So I know that whenever I call get AD computer with the Active Directory module that I'm going to be using, it's just represented by name. However, in the CSV field, you can see here, it's represented by a computer name. And the same thing with groups. We're going to be creating groups and organizational units as well. We just have to map those out to make sure we have all the attributes mapped correctly. So once we have kind of mapped all that out, next I want to grab all of these CSV users and put them in a CSV users variable. Next up, we're just going to be doing one at a time here, just so we can understand the code. So next up, we need to build the code that comes up with a SAM account name. This is for a user, so if a user needs to be created, we need to know how to actually create it. You know, right now we say, well, there's not a user in there, but how do you actually create it? There's a lot of different schemas that we can use. For our purposes, we're going to be doing first initial, last name. All right, so it didn't like that, so let's see why it didn't like that. Oh, we had CSV user here. So since we are just planning this out at the moment, I'm just doing one at a time. And looks like I didn't actually add that in. All right, so let's just do the very first one in the CSV file. All right, so that worked. So now we can look at proposed username, and now you can see that first employee in the CSV file. If there is a new user that's needed, which I assume there is, it's going to be called K Bradley. And the same kind of scheme is going to be used for each of the employees. All right, so next up, once we kind of have that schema figured out, we have all of that code figured out how to create the username. Next up, we need to build the code to check to see if a single user exists. And in this instance, I'm just creating one. I'm using a Bertram just so I know how to pull that out. And I'm using get AD user. The get AD user command is what actually can pull out Active Directory user. So I know that get AD user with the filter parameter allows me to do that. The same thing with groups. You know, it doesn't matter. Right now, we are just kind of going through planning. We know that get AD group pulls groups out, and we can have the syntax we can use for the filter parameter. Same thing with computers. We use get AD computer with the filter parameter. And finally, same thing with get AD organization unit. So we've been able to figure out the syntax for how we're going to do these checks. Okay, so now that we've kind of done all that planning, next up, we need to ensure we remove any duplicates from these objects. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, let's see here. Let's go to the CSV users. And we look down through here, and we can see that there may potentially be duplicates. So for example, in this instance, we have a department of IT, a department of operations, and a department of finance. So right now they're all different, but we know that there can be more than one user in a department. Because we're going to be creating these, we don't want to have to create that department over and over and over again. That just would not be good. And the same thing with the OUs to create. We have different locations. So in this case, we have a location of Chicago, location of Dallas, and a location of Houston. They're all different in this case, but we need to make sure that for all cases, that if you're running this in the real world, chances are you're going to have the same ones. So we need to be able to make these unique, so we only try to create those once. All right, so once we have all the duplicates out of here and we have an OUs to create and then we have a groups to create, so now we have those, then we can go ahead and create the OUs. This is where we actually go and do the checks. So there on line 94 through 100 is where we loop through all of the OUs to create. And we're doing that by first running that read check, that read code that we created earlier using get 80 organizational unit. If it exists, it's just going to send out a write verbose. It's just going to tell us the OU with the name, whatever it is, already exists. And if not, it's going to create the Active Directory organizational unit. So we can see the verbose output. I will go ahead and put verbose on here. All right, and now we can go ahead and create this, and let's see, these OUs may or may not be created. I'm not actually sure, to be honest with you. Let's see here. Oh, looks like I had a small typo. Oh, gotta love typos. All right, let's try that again. So we did not get any kind of verbose output. Let's see here why. Continue. There we go. The OU with the name Houston already exists. The OU with the name Dallas already exists, blah, blah, blah. So we're making this script smart so it checks for these things. And then we can do the same thing with groups again. For this instance, I'm saying that I want to create an OU that's the same thing as the department in the CSV, and the same thing with a group. I want to make sure that it's that way as well, because notice that when you have OUs to create and groups to create, we're looping through all of these. Up here, notice that we are using department for the groups, so we are saying that a department equals a group, and then we're also saying a location from that CSV equals an OU. So that's why we're doing those there. All right, and the same thing with up here, same kind of principle. You first check, and then if it doesn't exist, then create it. If not, create it. So it looks like one of those did exist because we only got the group with the name IT already exists. We had another one here. So which one actually did get created? Let's check and see. Operations and finance. Looks like those were not, so those should be created. We can actually check and see and run this again. And then now you can see that they already exist. So it did sync those groups up. All right, so we've got OUs and groups created. Next up, we want to create the users and computers and add the users to the appropriate groups. To do that, on line 115 is where we start looping through all of the CSV users. So if you recall, we have a CSV users array of 3 different employees. And then first up, we need to do the same kind of principle. Check for the object, and if it doesn't exist, then create it. In this case, we're doing users. On 118 is where we use that proposed username syntax. We have to know how to create the username. In this case, we're using the first initial of the first name and then the last name of the employee. And then on 119, it looks very similar. We're using that same get 80 user, that get code, to check and see if the user exists. And then if it doesn't, then on 122 to 131 is where we're actually creating a user. So we're using the new 80 user command, passing in the proposed username that we had created, and then there's where we're specifying the path. So there we correlated the location property in the CSV file to the OU name is where we can specify that here. And then you can see we're specifying the given name, surname, employee ID, office phone number. We are making sure that all of those correlate to each other. And then finally on 134 is where we run add AD group member. We're passing the department to that because remember that we wanted to match up a department to a group. And then for the members is where we're actually passing in the username to create to the group. And then while we're still in that loop, looping through each of those CSV users, is when we'll do the computer name. This is exactly the same kind of concept as before. Checking for the computer. If it doesn't exist, then create it. All right, so now let's go ahead and see if this works. I don't know if I've actually tested this or not, but we will see. All right, we didn't get any kind of verbose, which is good, no errors. Looks like it actually created them, so let's actually see here. All right, so let's first see what users it should have created. So we'll look at CSV users. All right, so it should have created Kenwood Bradley, Matt McElreath, and Eric Stevens. And because of the proposed username and password, the first initial and last name, I know that if this worked, we should be able to do K Bradley. Oh, didn't use the right command there. Get Bradley. All right, K Bradley is there. Who else do we have? M. McElreath. So I know it's going to be first initial, last name. M. McElreath. Yep. And then Eric Stevens is going to be E. Stevens. Okay, looks like they were all created. And looks like the computer names were supposed to be created too, and we can go ahead and check for those. Actually, we can just check for these by only outputting the computer names here. Ken's PC, Matt's PC, and Eric's PC. We can do get AD computer, identity, Ken's PC, Eric's PC, and who was the last one? Oh, terrible memory. Matt's PC. There we go. All right, so all those have been created. So now, if this worked right, the read checks worked, it should just go through and not create anything and just check and make sure they're all there. So now we can just run this over and over and over again. This is the key to these sync scripts. Make the check first and then do it. So now it tells us it already existed. We can just run it over and over again, and it's going to be doing the same thing. And then finally, to wrap this up, on line 149 here, I have a function called sync active directory. And basically, this does exactly the same thing. I'm not going to go over this in any manner whatsoever. You can find this in the resources for this video, but this kind of does the same thing. It uses the same approach in the code, but one thing I do want to point out, for the parameters there's a field sync map. That allows us to pass in the various properties from the CSV file and map those to Active Directory attributes. So that's one thing that may be a little bit different, but everything else is pretty self-explanatory there. You can see on 242 through 249, we have all the various parameters that we can pass to it. And like I said, this is generally, if you understand PowerShell and you understand what we went through before, this is just generally the same concept. So that has been creating some objects in Active Directory from a CSV file. Thanks for watching.